You know, golf club manufacturers, they promise a lot of things. Every year when they come out with a new driver, a new set of irons, they make a lot of promises about those clubs, and a lot of times they don't really deliver. But yet, we keep buying what they're selling like some kind of idiots with amnesia. Why is that? You know, I started this YouTube channel back in 2019. I believe it was March of 2019, so we're a little over 5 years in. But I was playing golf before I started the channel, you know, for plenty of years. I remember the TaylorMade burner bubble shaft when it came out. I remember original Big Bertha when it came out. And there have certainly been golf clubs that have come out across the years that ever so often they really move the needle. Drivers that actually make a pretty big difference, either in forgiveness or in distance. Has there really been any progression with drivers that's made that big of a difference? In 5 years, have you really seen advancements in drivers that really make an impact? I think that the question I want to ask in this video is, if all of these driver claims year after year after year by all of these club manufacturers are absolutely true and they deliver 100% on what they say they're going to, then why aren't we driving the golf ball 500 yards? And the reason is pretty simple. They're not delivering on what they say they're going to do. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been some advancements in technology and with distance and even with forgiveness. There certainly have, but the quantum leaps can be noted in retrospect, in hindsight, where you can look back and say, yeah, this driver really kind of changed the game. The great Big Bertha that I mentioned is absolutely one of those drivers. Those are few and far between. That doesn't happen every single year, but if you listen to the marketing that these companies are putting out, then every single year, this is the year. This is the biggest breakthrough in drivers for decades. This is it. Go buy this one. Then the next year, they do the exact same thing. So why do we keep drinking that Kool-Aid? Why do we keep spending all of that money year after year after year when really the data just doesn't back up what they claim? Now, something that just crosses my mind from time to time, I keep coming back to this thought ever so often. I can't say how often it is, but I think about it. The money that we shell out for these, for a club that you're going to use a maximum of 14 times per round. 4 par 3s, the rest are par 4s and par 5s. Even if you pull driver off the tee in every occurrence that you possibly can, you're going to hit that club 14 times. And then you look at your putter. You can get a putter for anywhere from $200 to $300. You can even go cheaper than that if you want to. But let's just say that the average putter costs about $300. That's about half the price of a driver. But most people are hitting easily 2 to 2.5 times as many shots per round with their putter as they are with their driver. Now, if you can get the putter for half the price, and that's still an expensive putter, there are cheaper options out there, but if you can get the putter for half the price of this driver, and you're going to use the putter at least twice as much, in some people's cases it's going to be 3 times as much, but at least twice as much, then that means that the putter, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, what you spend on the putter is 4 times more valuable than your driver. Think about that for a second, because it crosses my mind all the time, and I wonder, why are we not buying the latest putter that comes out every year to try and reduce the 32 or 36 or 42 putts that you hit per round down to a much more manageable and respectable number to really drop your scores? Because at the end of the day, even if you get an extra 5 or 6 yards off your driver, is that really dropping your scores that much? Now, I briefly touched on COR just a minute ago. COR, it's a fancy term. It's an anagram for coefficient of restitution. What does that mean in layman's terms? Essentially, what that basically means is they put a limit on how hot the face of a driver can be, meaning that when you strike the golf ball, the return of the energy that you've put into that golf ball cannot be above a certain number. The COR on the drivers acts as sort of a governor on that. It will only allow every driver that comes out to have a certain degree of hotness to the face, and every club manufacturer is pushing their club to that absolute limit. Now, there are certainly tolerances, a little bit above, a little bit below, things like that. Of course, you're going to get this cushion, but they all have to fall into this conforming category where the face can only be so hot. And if every manufacturer is pushing the limit of their drivers to that COR that has been assigned, then how can one driver really be that much further than another driver? And there's a number of ways maybe that they accomplish little things to help get them a little bit of an edge. It can be the combination of the shaft that they put in there. Maybe it's a shaft that is absolutely just perfectly tuned for this phantom average golfer out there that they pull numbers for. And this shaft is 70% of the golfers out there are going to get an extra 5 yards, but it's not going to necessarily be because of the driver club head or the driver face. It's going to be because of the shaft and the driver head combination. Maybe they allow you to get a little faster. Maybe the shaft is a little lighter. Maybe the shaft is a little longer. That's another little trick they use. Instead of having a 45.25 inch length or a 45.5 inch length, some manufacturers put a stock shaft in their drivers that's 45.75. Now, I know that sounds like very small amounts, but when you increase the moment arm of the lever that you're using, you can increase the speed with the same amount of force that's being put into it, meaning that you can get faster club head speeds with a longer shafted driver. But that doesn't always correlate to more accurate strikes or finding more fairways. As you know, a lot of long drivers, when they get to a certain point with the length of their club and they've pushed it, there's a law of diminishing returns that kind of takes effect. And they lose so much accuracy that they can't keep the ball in the grid enough times to get any real use out of that extra speed. So there is a marriage of speed and consistency and accuracy of strike in order to be able to get the ball in the fairway. After all, if you can hit it 400 yards, but it's going to end up OB every time in the woods because you can't control it, is it really that much better than one that's a fairway finder almost every time? So these little tricks that they use by putting the right shaft with it or making the shaft a little bit longer, maybe at the end of the day, that does absolutely get you a little bit of extra length, but at what cost? Do you give up consistency? Hard to say. It's hard to say because golfing is an individual game and it can only be down to what you actually find when you purchase a driver and take it out there and put it in play. One other little thing I think about before I get off the subject of COR is I kind of have this parallel in my mind where I compare it to NASCAR. I'm not a big NASCAR fan. My dad is. I've never really watched a lot of NASCAR, but I've definitely listened to my dad talk about stock car racing. And one of the things that they talk about in the old days with stock car racing was the cars were not equal. They would soup up their cars in a certain way that gave them an edge over the competition so that yes, you had to have a driver, and yes, the driver was actually driving the race, and they had to make the right moves and drive the car and pilot it. So, of course, the driver was an important part of the equation. But really what it came down to was who had the faster car. Fast forward to today's stock car racing, and all of the cars have to be governed in this certain sort of they have to be put into a box. They have to have this, they have to have that. It's a governor on the cars. It's just almost the same thing as what COR is in golf clubs. So now when you have someone who drives the golf ball further, it's not because they have superior equipment. They have more skill at getting more distance out of their club. The COR has been pushed to the limit. They can't go any further. There's nothing they can do to make the face of that club any hotter than the next dozen clubs back behind it. And I think that's a pretty good analogy for COR. There's been a lot of technological advancement when it comes to forgiveness with these drivers. Things like twist face, jailbreak technology, just different things like that that are supposed to help you on off-center hits. So if you have a driver, like I have one on my wall over here from 2017, it's a TaylorMade M2. Now, when you find the middle of the face, or just slightly above the middle of that face with that driver, you get some long drives for you, relatively speaking. But I found it to be a very unforgiving driver, meaning that anywhere out of that supposed perfect Goldilocks zone sweet spot that's on the driver, you really do get penalized. You're going to lose distance. You're going to get some weird flights. You're not going to have shots that are anywhere near what you're used to or your best, or even your average for that matter. You're going to take a hit when you miss it. Now, with the 10K drivers that they're coming out with, like the TaylorMade QI10 and the Ping G430 Max 10K LS whatever. Yes, you are supposed to have more stability on off-center strikes, leading to less loss of distance, and actually you're supposed to have a little bit of forgiveness as far as your line and where the ball is going to land. Now, to a certain extent, even a club without a lot of technology built into it is going to have some more of a gear effect to it, meaning if you catch it on the toe, it's going to try and spin back towards center a little bit. If you hit it on the heel, it's going to try and do that as well, but you lose so much distance, and you can really get some wicked curves out of strikes like that, depending on how your face is oriented and your swing path and where the strike is on the club face. So a lot of the clubs they're coming out with now, they're not necessarily saying that we're going to give you more distance, we're just going to give you more forgiveness. So that's why you should buy this club. Now for the interactive portion of this show, where I ask you a question. If you have purchased a driver in the last year or two that replaced a driver you bought just the year or two before that one, did it make a big difference? Did you see a large distance gain? Did you get an extra 4, 5, 6 yards? If that's the case, and if you bought the driver and you said, you know what, this gave me an extra 5, 6 yards off the tee and I need every yard I can get, okay, if you had that happen, has your handicap dropped? Has it translated to better golf in a marked difference? If you buy the latest driver and you're paying that much money and you're going through the whole buying process and reviewing and trying out all these different clubs and you're investing all this time and you're trying to learn a new driver and you put all this effort and time into it, I would say that for me, I want it to save me at least 1 or 2 strokes around. And that can't be a feeling. That's got to be an actual quantified, measured improvement in your game, meaning you track your stats with Golf Pad, 18 birdies, or just turning in scorecards at your local golf course or wherever you're a member. You have to actually see that drop. It can't just be a feeling. I feel like I shot, or I went out and shot better scores that week. Over the course of 6 months, if you tracked all of your data and all of your shots and your handicap, did you actually drop 2 strokes because you purchased that driver? And if you did, how can you be sure that it wasn't just your skill that improved? Or maybe the driver actually cost you an extra 0.22 strokes, but your putting improved and your approach shots improved because you just developed a little more skill with your short irons. Maybe you changed golf balls. Maybe it wasn't even the driver head itself. Maybe it was the shaft that came with that driver or the new shaft that you got fitted for. There's all of these things that have to work in concert together in order to bring together a skillful game and better drives that find the fairway more often. A gain of 5 yards with your driver, I don't see how that's going to improve your game. Now, if you had a driver from say 10 or 12 years ago and you were averaging, let's say 250 total off the tee with that driver, and let's say you averaged 75% of your fairways. So 250 and 75% of your fairways. And now you try a driver 10 years later, and all of a sudden your average total is up to something like 265, and you've hit 80% of your fairways. That to me is a worthwhile difference because that means you got 15 yards off the tee. That is an entire club. For some people, that's a club and a half. That means instead of hitting a 7-iron into a green, you might actually be able to get away with an 8 or even a hard 9. That club, statistically, should help you hit the green more often and give you more birdie putts. So that is a real tangible difference that was made. But to just go out every year and plop down another $600 to get the latest driver that you just bought the new version of last year, because they tell you that it's going to get another 7 yards this year, another 14 yards this year on this model, I think that's just insane. One last thing I'll say about these drivers is that I think getting someone who knows what they're doing, a professional, a fitter, something like that, to get you into a simulator bay or out on the driving range and to test out your current driver and see if you can make it work for you. See if you can find the combination of the right loft or the right weighting, putting the weight forward or the weight back in the driver head, changing the length total of your club to help you find more consistent strikes or to get more distance. Changing out the shaft, maybe even changing out the grip. I think if you can get with somebody and test out a lot of different things like that, you probably can find ways to squeeze more efficiency out of your driver, maybe hit more fairways, maybe get a little more yardage out of it. And I think that's great. If you can do that, this is a game of inches, so every little bit helps. But at what price? If you can go get a new shaft put in your driver, and let's say it's $150 to $200 this year, that's a lot better value, I think, if you're able to get results out of it, than going and buying the latest and greatest driver for another $600. You know, another company that reminds me of is like, I see iPhone commercials every year, and I think the one I saw this year or last year, they came out with the iPhone commercial and they said, now you can get the iPhone in these colors. It's the same iPhone you have. The only improvement they made was they changed the color of it. But now they're going to go through, and all of these corporate fat cats are going to be able to sell you the same iPhone again, just in a different color, and make all that money they made last year all over again. When they're going to buy a case, put a case on it to protect their investment, you're never going to see the color of that phone. I think that's psychotic as well. But anyway, I've gotten a lot of information over the years from a lot of different sources on a lot of different things. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about today was the driver. There's better ways to spend your money. There's better ways to spend your energy. And I think there are certainly better ways to drop your handicap. So hope this helped to make some smarter decisions for you. See you next time.